ਜਸ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੋਸਟ ਆਸ਼ਮਿਤਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਿੱਘਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਾਂਗੀ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਇਆ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਰਕਿੰਗ ਐਵਰੇਜ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਐਵਰੇਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਹਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਅਕਸਰ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਇਹ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਰੋਡੂਲੈਂਟ ਲੋਨਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਜੋ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਅਸਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਸੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਬਿਊਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ। ਕਾਫੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਹਸਤੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਸਕੈਂਡਲਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਈਆਂ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਏ, ਬਟ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਸਟ ਬਰੀਫਲੀ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ। ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਏ ਫਾਰਮਰ ਫੁੱਟਬਾਲ ਪਲੇਅਰ ਬ੍ਰੈਟ ਫਾਰਵ। multi-million dollar ਇਹਦਾ ਫੁੱਟਬਾਲ ਕਰੀਅਰ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਇੰਡੀਵਿਜੂਅਲ ਦਾ। ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰਿਟੀ ਸਟੇਟਸ, ਕਿੰਨੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇੰਡੋਰਸਮੈਂਟਸ, ਡੀਲਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਇਸ ਹਸਤੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਮੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਫਾਇਦੇਮੰਦ ਹੋਈਆਂ। ਬਟ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਇੰਡੀਵਿਜੂਅਲ ਨੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਹੰਡਰਡਸ ਆਫ ਮਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਡਾਲਰ ਦਾ ਫਰਾਡ ਕੀਤਾ। ਉਹ ਪੈਸਾ ਜੋ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਜੋ ਲੋੜਵੰਦ ਸੀਗੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਖੋ ਕੇ ਇਹਨੇ ਲਿਆ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਲਈ। ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਹੁਣ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦੇ ਜੋ ਲੋਨਸ ਹਨ, ਜੋ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਅਸਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਅੱਗੇ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਉਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਜੋ ਲੋਕੀ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਵੱਡੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ, ਮਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਆਫ ਡਾਲਰਸ, ਟੈਨਸ ਆਫ ਮਿਲੀਅਨ, ਹੰਡਰਡਸ ਆਫ ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਡਾਲਰਸ ਦੇ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ। ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਈਆਂ ਨੇ, ਅਕਸਰ ਜੋ ਅਮੀਰ ਸੀਗੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਨ ਲੋਨਸ ਦਾ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ। ਬਟ ਅੱਜ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਨ ਡੈਪਥ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੀ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਨ ਲੋਨਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਲੋੜਮੰਦ ਇੰਡੀਵਿਜੂਅਲਸ ਨੇ ਲਿੱਤੇ, ਜੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੱਕ ਡੂੰਘੇ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਅਫੈਕਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ। ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਸਦੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿੰਨੇ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਸਦੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਡੈਕੇਡਸ ਤੋਂ, ਦਹਾਕਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਅਗਰ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਤੇ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਚਲਾ ਲਓ। ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਡੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਦੀ ਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਊਬਰ ਹੋਵੇ, ਬਟ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਗੈਰੰਟੀਡ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲੀ ਸਟੇਬਲ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ। ਇੱਕ ਇੰਡੀਵਿਜੂਅਲ, ਇੱਕ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਜੋ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਕੰਮ ਨਾ ਕਰ ਸਕੇ, ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਉਹ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਚਲਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਸੁਪਨਾ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੱਧ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਦਾ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ। ਐਂਡ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਪੁਰਾਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੁਣ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਗਰ ਇੱਕ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪ ਦਾ ਪੈਸਾ ਇਨਵੈਸਟ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਇਹ ਰੀਅਲ ਏਸਟੇਟ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਫਾਇਦੇਮੰਦ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਸ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀਆਂ ਬਰਬਾਦ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਤੇ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਲਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ। ਐਂਡ ਉਹ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਪਾਏ ਗਏ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਫਰੋਡੂਲੈਂਟ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹ ਡੈਟ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੋਨ ਸ਼ਾਰਕਸ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ। ਇਸ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਟਰਮ ਹੈਗੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਲਿੱਤੇ, ਅਬਵ ਮਾਰਕੀਟ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਪੈਸੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਦਿੱਤੇ, ਅਤੇ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਾਰਕੀਟ ਦਾ ਨਕਸ਼ਾ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਦੀ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗੀ। ਜਿੰਨੇ ਕੁ ਪੈਸੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਲਈ ਖਰਚੇ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗੀ। ਕਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਖੁਦਕੁਸ਼ੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਕਰਕੇ। ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਕਸਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਰਬਾਦ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਾਂ। ਬਟ ਇਸ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ, ਕਈ ਲੋਕਲ ਇਲੈਕਟਿਡ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲਸ ਅਤੇ ਕਈ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਸਟਸ ਨੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਇੱਕ ਸਟੈਂਡ ਲਿੱਤਾ, ਇੱਕ ਮੋਰਚਾ ਰਚਿਆ। ਇਸ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਇਲੈਕਟਿਡ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ ਇਸ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਡਟ ਕੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੋਏ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਦੈਟ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਦੀ ਡੈਟ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਆਨਗੋਇੰਗ ਸੀਗਾ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਸਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਸੀ, ਹੰਗਰ ਸਟ੍ਰਾਈਕਸ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਨਤੀਜਾ ਨਿਕਲਿਆ। ਇਨਫੈਕਟ ਇੱਕ ਹਿਸਟੋਰਿਕ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ 30 ਸਤੰਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਜਾਰੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ। ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਹੋ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀ ਹੋਈ ਡੈਟ ਹੈਗੀ, ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ। ਹਲੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਹਿਸਟੋਰਿਕ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਸਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ, ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਜੁੜ ਰਹੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਲੋਕਲੀ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀਮੈਨ, ਸਟੇਟ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀਮੈਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ। ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਡੈਟ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੱਕ ਸਿਗਨੀਫਿਕੈਂਟ ਜਿੱਤ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਜੋ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਵਰਕਰਸ, ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਓਨਰਸ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਇਸ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਦੇਰ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਜਿੱਤ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੇਣ ਲਈ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰੇ। ਪਹਿਲੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹੋ, ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹੋ। Representing the 36th Assembly District right here in New York City, Assemblyman Zohram Mamdani. Assemblyman Mamdani, once again, great to have you on the show. Welcome to the program. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal ji, thank you so much for having me on the program. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you, because you always bring really relevant information about not just the constituency, assembly member, but also the power of people coming together. And this is one area that so deeply affects not just the Punjabi or the Sikh community right here in New York, but the South Asian community and immigrants to a larger extent, for whom, you know, driving taxis or today Ubers or owning medallions was once the key to the American dream, and then obviously things changed along the way. Assembly member, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of a recap. You joined us, earlier in the summer talking about the story, and even last year when there was a historic hunger strike taking place right here in downtown New York City. But give us a little bit of a background of what transpired before the historic victory that we're going to be sharing with viewers today.
Absolutely, and even before I get into that, I do just want to echo the points that you made. 94% of taxi drivers in New York City are immigrants. They're born outside of this country. And of taxi drivers, 40% are from South Asia.
Wow.
We are the highest region of national origin for taxi drivers. And if you look at the top countries of national origin, we're talking about Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, amongst those top 5. And so this is, as you said, a concern that so many of us, being South Asian, growing up in New York City, it's a concern that's near and dear to our hearts. Either we know someone in our own family who's a driver, or we're close to somebody whose father is a driver or their mother is a driver. So it's not a foreign struggle for so many of us.
Right.
To your question of how we got here, it has really been a journey. And first and foremost, that journey has been led by the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. This is the union of more than 25,000 members that has been fighting for taxi drivers for decades. And the kind of abridged summary of this story is that early last year, the de Blasio administration in around, let's say, February, came out with a plan that they called their relief plan, where they would lower drivers' principal balance to about $330,000. But as we know, that is not a small sum of money. That is still quite a large amount of money for a driver to pay off, especially when you consider that the market value of a medallion today is a little south of $200,000. So the union fought with multiple key demands. The first was that we get this principal balance down to $170,000. The second is that we get a fixed interest rate, because so many drivers were in predatory lending agreements. They had balloon payments, they had fluctuating rates. The third, and most important, frankly, was that these loans would be backed by the city. That means if a driver was unable to make their payments, then the city would pay the difference. Because right now, what we have and what we have had for many years is that lenders could pursue drivers' other assets. So we heard these heartbreaking stories of drivers who had spent decades driving their cabs only for these lenders to then not only take their medallion, but also their home.
Yep.
And those key demands formed the central points of this struggle. And with the course of last summer and last fall, that became 46 days of 24/7 protest outside of City Hall, where we had marches and rallies and press conferences. It became a civil disobedience arrest of myself and 5 other elected officials. And then in its final stage, it became a 15-day hunger strike. The drivers led, and I was one of those who joined in solidarity. And on the 15th day, on November 3rd of last year, we reached a tentative agreement between the city, Marblegate or Field Point or De Palma, the largest taxi medallion lender in the industry, and the union. And that agreement was tentative last November 3rd and came to life just last Monday when the program was launched. And in just over a week, we have already erased $200 million of debt from the backs of hundreds of working class taxi drivers.
That is such an amazing number. I need you to repeat that. $200 million of debt erased from folks who were wrongfully, you can say, led to believe that they needed to take these loans out and that the market value of these medallions was inflated to get them to take these loans out. Assemblymember, I just, from a point of personal, knowledge with some of these drivers and a history of living in New York and having grown up, seeing people talk about this, families at dinner tables, right? I remember when the value of medallions was discussed as being close to $1 million. And that was, we repeat this point over and over again because this is the kind of thinking that these drivers were holding on to when they took these loans on, that you could invest up to $1 million in a medallion, and it was better than investing in real estate because that medallion would make you that money back and then some, that you can support a whole household on the income that you could generate from owning one medallion. That is clearly not the case, hasn't been for a long time. But those individuals that got saddled with that debt are still stuck paying off those loans. You mentioned the names of some of these lenders. Before we kind of get into the details of the lenders and how all of these negotiations were worked out, clearly the work was very difficult. It's taken the better part of the year to accomplish this, but the result is absolutely worth it. Before we get to all of that, you mentioned the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, right? Just as someone who's been involved with the organizing side of this story from the beginning, tell us a little bit about what that looked like, what it's looked like to kind of push this debt relief program forward, because oftentimes we hear about these sad stories, the suicides, the communities that cannot cope, that are just left behind, but we hardly ever hear of something working out in their favor, right? And I want to highlight the big role that community action, that organizations like the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, elected officials working hand in hand at the local level, at the grassroots level, the kind of impact that makes. I'd love for you to share some details about that since you are intimately aware.
Absolutely. And the first thing I would say is my beginning in terms of my involvement in this fight is not the beginning of the fight. This fight has been going on since the mid-90s when Verizon FiOS I and so many others came together to form the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. And, my involvement started, I would say, politically in my campaign when I made this a plank of my campaign that I would cancel excessive medallion debt. But I thought I would do that in Albany. I didn't think that I would do it through political action at City Hall. And the thing that I will always remember is it is the union and Verizon FiOS I specifically who would always keep that light of hope and that light of belief alive. I remember after 12 days of being on hunger strike, close to 2 weeks without any solid food, I was starting to question, how long could we go? Could we actually win this fight? Could the city just wait us out? And it was Bhairavi that told me that we were going to win. And it wasn't just empty words in the hopes that we would find a way. It was a belief that had been cultivated because she had built with so many others in this union more than a 20,000 strong membership organization. And I think that that is the key, is that we only won this battle, we only erased this debt because of the fact that we fought together. Individually, you may have hundreds of thousands of dollars of a loan, and you may not see any way out, and your only options may seem to be administrative processes with these loans and lenders and these banks, none of which seem to be designed for you to succeed. But together, debtors organized in a union can wield power. And that's what happened in this fight. It was a fight of the workers who were organized, defeating capital. And I think, as you said, for many in America, middle-class life has been symbolized by a white picket fence.
Yeah.
But for immigrants in New York City, it has been symbolized by a medallion on the hood of your taxi.
Yeah.
The city sold that dream to immigrants and then took the rug out from under them. And what we're seeing in this moment is a significant portion of justice finally being paid back to those workers who have been misled, who have been exploited, and who have frankly been left for dead. Yeah. And as you alluded to, 9 of our drivers took their own life over this past decade because of the plight of the debt crisis, the scale of the crisis. And their words and their stories inspired us to keep fighting over the course of last fall. And I remember being there in front of City Hall, reading out the words from Douglas Shifter, one of the most loved taxi drivers in the community who took his own life because of this. And in those words, there was a hope that the world would know of this crisis and of just how deep and how utterly devastating it was. And it is because of the work and the words of people like Douglas Shifter that we got to this point today.
Once again, Assemblymember, it's sometimes hard to fathom that here in the United States, in New York City, the capital of the world, some would argue that there are folks that are working hard, pursuing an honest living, and are still driven to suicide because of relentless debt, despite working hours and hours, being away from their family in a tireless profession, and they still are driven to suicide because of debt like this predatory debt. But I'm so glad that there is relief because of all this hard work. So I want to share the details of this debt relief program. We have a couple of days left for folks to take advantage. Like you said, already in a week, $200 million of debt has been canceled, and we have a couple more days to help folks out with this. Assembly Member Mamdani, we're going to stop for a quick break here. Please don't go anywhere. Viewers, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟਸ ਹਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਵੇਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਉਸ ਪਾਰ। ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮੁੜ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ। ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ, ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਹੈਗੀ, ਤੇ ਡੈਟ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਰੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕरें। ਇੱਕ ਇਤਿਹਾਸਿਕ ਡੈਟ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ hundreds of millions of dollars already ਮਾਫ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਜੋ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ। ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੇਣ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਇਲੈਕਟਿਡ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਖੜ ਕੇ ਇਸ ਲੜਾਈ ਨੂੰ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਟੈਕਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਡਰਾਈਵਰਸ ਨਾਲ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਲੜਾਈ ਲੜੀ ਹੈ। ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੀ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਮੈਂਬਰ Zohram Mamdani. Assembly member, you're the first South Asian as well as the first Ugandan to hold a seat in the New York State Assembly, and it just seems so fitting that every time you come on our program, you talk about an issue that is so deeply connected to the South Asian community here in New York City. You gave us some staggering numbers when it comes to taxi drivers and the makeup of that community. The overwhelming number of drivers, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, even today, hail from South Asia. And so this is a uniquely South Asian problem that we're discussing, these predatory loans. But there's a significant win that we can celebrate today. As of the last Monday, I believe, this program has been implemented that has been months in the making. Well over a year, you guys have been fighting for this alongside the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Over 25,000 drivers are part of this organization and elected officials such as yourself. Assemblymember Mamdani, the average medallion owning driver is currently $500,000 in debt as a result of predatory loans, like you said, that have fluctuating conditions of repayment interest rates, these things that even for savvy individuals are complicated. We're talking about immigrants that just wanted to make an honest living, that were essentially fooled into signing these documents and giving up guarantees that were personal, their homes, their properties, their assets, which today seems absolutely ridiculous. But the good news is that this relief program has been implemented. Tell us what the relief program looks like. And please, Assemblymember, I'd like for you to start by giving us some information about companies like Marblegate. Marblegate, which is one of the lenders and owns over 70% of all active taxi medallion loans. Tell us a little bit about, how entities such as Marblegate function, how they serve to entrap folks that may not know better, and what kind of work you have done alongside others to get Marblegate to take back some of these loans.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would just say is, just to clarify, this program is not ending in a few days.
Oh, okay.
But for drivers who have Marblegate loans or Field Point or De Palma loans, their deadline is on Friday.
Okay.
But for drivers who have other lenders, the program continues to be open. It is just for those specific lenders I mentioned that the deadline is Friday.
Okay, great.
But I think that I can't speak specifically to Marblegate's practices in terms of loan agreements, but I can tell you that generally what we've found is that drivers will sign a loan with one lender, and then that lender over time may sell their loan to another lender. And so you'll find many drivers who knew their original lender, have no idea who their secondary lender is, and then may even have a tertiary lender a few years down the line. And it is so difficult to keep track of who owns your debt when your debt is continually being repackaged and sold. So that's one of the key issues is, some drivers have loans with banks and with kind of more classic names that you might be familiar with. Other drivers have loans with private equity companies now who have been buying these loans off of the secondary loan market. Yeah. And to what your point was earlier, drivers being fooled, we had lenders who were barred from operating in the housing market post the 2008 crash, who were welcomed into the taxi medallion market. So people whose practices were too predatory in one of America's most critical industries, then brought into one where the populace was disproportionately immigrant and allowed to thrive at the expense of thousands of working class taxi drivers. Wow. So the key of why a company like Marblegate or so many other companies now today would join into a program like this is twofold. One is because of the organizing of the union, because the union made these companies the focus of all of their organizing and activity. And two is because these companies are getting a guarantee from the city now that if a driver defaults, then the loan will still be paid, but it'll be paid by the city. So in exchange for that security, the lender agrees to reduce the entirety of the balance to $200,000. And in exchange for that, the city provides a $30,000 grant, then bringing the new balance to $170,000. So as you had said, the average driver today has more than $500,000 of debt because
Right.
of their medallion loan. This program takes that 500,000 plus, brings it down to 170, a fixed interest rate of 7.3%, a maximum loan term of 25 years, and a city-backed guarantee on every single one of those loans.
So there's no personal assets, no, you're putting up your personal property, your family home on the line for these loans. Now these are backed by the city. That must be such a relief to these drivers. Assembly member, I'd love for you to share any personal interactions you had with some of the drivers, once again, in this historic and extremely significant victory. What is the emotion and the general feeling that you're encountering from some of these folks that get to benefit from this relief program?
No, it's a sense of disbelief mixed with joy, mixed with a real exhilaration at the fact that their life could possibly be starting again.
Yeah.
Every day the Taxi and Limousine Commission and the union have been putting out photos of drivers who have restructured their loans. And for me, sitting at work, looking through these photos and seeing the faces of the uncles who were on hunger strike with me is an immensely moving experience to see 50, 60, 70-year-old, 80-year-old individuals who are wiping away hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt from their backs and from the backs of their families.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, Augustine Tang, he was on hunger strike. His father was a taxi driver, and then he became a taxi driver. And he wrote about this experience of restructuring his loan. And he said, I've been freed from debt peonage. And I will never forget where I was when I joined the union and where I am now. Yeah. And how solidarity has taken me from a life of servitude to a life of freedom. And that is what collective struggle can do. Because if you do not even dare to demand something, then you will never win it. But with a union such as this, the demands are there, and now we see that the results are there as well. And I think that...
Yeah, Assembly Member, you mentioned the work of the union, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, folks coming together. This has been a growing pattern that we are seeing more of across the country, whether it's the Amazon warehouse right here in our backyard, Starbucks, other entities, popular ones like Trader Joe's, the grocery store. You hear all about the struggles of people trying to come together, and sometimes it doesn't always end in success, but it's a long road. The stories we're hearing about today are still progress nonetheless. It is a very contentious election year. Midterm elections are just around the corner. Whether it's people coming together in unions or on the streets to protest things that affect their communities, or coming together at the ballot box, I guess, as an elected official, I just love to get a call to action from you for all of our viewers, for the immigrants watching, the new immigrants, or the folks that are second, third generation, have been living here, are well established, how these issues require our attention no matter where we fall in the line in this country, and what folks need to do going into November.
Absolutely. Well, what I would say is to everyone watching at home, that the economic system that we live under, a system known as capitalism, the intent of that system is to make you feel isolated, to make you understand yourself as an individual, to think that all of your struggles are struggles that are because of your own mistakes, that they are struggles that you feel alone. But the truth of this, as we look around and see what others are going through, is that these are struggles that so many others are experiencing. They're not actually struggles that are of any fault of an individual. They are systemic struggles. And as you were saying earlier, thinking about the fact that in this country we have people who work an honest living and are ending up under so much debt that they take their own life, is an indication of how deeply systemic these issues are. And so when you get that sense that you're not alone in this fight, the only way to defeat these issues and to ensure that you have a life that is worth living, a life with dignity, a life where you work hard and you have enough money to have a place to call your own, food to feed your family, and schools for your children to go to, is by coming together. And whether that means coming together with people who already have like-minded political beliefs, or it means coming together with fellow workers who are going through the same industry as you, it is through that act of collective struggle that you can win so many of your demands. Because I speak to you now as someone who is looking at a program that has canceled over $200 million of debt. That is an amount of money that so many, yeah, truly, and so many people would tell you that that is not realistic, that that is not possible. There were so many people who told me when I went on hunger strike last year that what I was doing had no basis in reality. And 15 days later, we won this agreement.
Wow. And
now 10 months later, this agreement has come to life, and so many drivers have their life back. So what I would say is understand that your problems are not just your own, and then reach out to those who you see in the same sectors as yourself, whether that be economic sectors or political ones, and organize with them. And the last thing I would just tell drivers who are at home, or anyone who knows a driver, is that this program, if you are a driver who has a loan with Marblegate, also known as Field Point, also known as De Palma, you need to restructure your loan by Friday. You need to do it by Friday. And what I would recommend to you is you should go in person to the Falchi building, which is at 3100 37th Avenue in Long Island City on the 4th floor. You can go there from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. My best recommended time is 10 a.m. But any time between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., if you have a loan with any of those three companies I said, you should go tomorrow and get there in person, and you should make sure that you restructure your loan. Because if you restructure your loan, you can get your life back. And the things that you will know to be eligible in this program is that you must own less than 5 medallions, and that you must have owned your medallion before March of 2021. So right now the focus is on Marblegate, Field Point, and De Palma. After this Friday, the focus will then go to PenFed loans. After that, there will be other loans. Great. And if you're ever in doubt or wondering about your situation, you should call the union. You should call the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, and you can call them at 718-706-9892.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Assembly Member Zohram Mamdani. Always a pleasure. Such important information that you've shared with our viewers. Thank you so much for your time. Keep fighting the good fight. We'd love to have you back on the program again soon. But have a great rest of your evening, and congratulations again on this historic victory. Take care.
Thank you so much. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal. Viewers, once again, ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇਨ ਕੰਪਨੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਮੈਡਾਲੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਹਨ, ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਦਾ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਮਾਫ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ 2 ਦਿਨ ਹੈਗੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਜੋ ਲੋਨਸ ਹਨ ਇਨ ਕੰਪਨੀਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. info@justbroadcasting.com, aashmeeta@justbroadcasting.com. And in closing, collective struggle ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਜਾਣਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਵੱਡੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਦਾ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਕਾਰਜ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਜਿੱਤ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਬਟ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕਜੁੱਟ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਲੜਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਾਸਿਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ. What a wonderful message, and once again congratulations to all of those drivers, those medallion owners ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਲੜਿਆ, ਇਹ ਜਿੱਤ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕੀਤੀ. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ. ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ.